Well, good morning and welcome to the Florida Chamber's 2020 Florida Economic Outlook. I'm Mark Wilson. I serve as the President and CEO of the Florida Chamber of Commerce. The Board of Directors and I appreciate your interest in Florida, in Florida's success, and specifically in uniting together for good. In many ways, 2020 will be a period of continued opportunity for Florida. And although it must be said right up front that despite some of the numbers that you'll hear about this morning, the business community in Florida cannot and must not take for granted the momentum that Florida, the business community, Governor DeSantis, and the legislature has built. In fact, it's fair to say Florida is at a crossroads, and we have to make the right long-term decisions. We realize that not everyone agrees with the Florida Chamber's approach to championing free enterprise and growing the private sector, but we're going to continue to fight for what we believe works for all Floridians. In just a few moments, I will introduce Dr. Jerry Parrish, the Florida Chamber Foundation's chief economist. And Dr. Parrish will give the Florida Chamber Foundation's official forecast and outlook for 2020. As our board members already know, the Florida Chamber is the only state chamber in America with a full-time chief economist on staff. But before I turn it over to Dr. Parrish, I'd like to cover a few points and give a bit of context. First, because we're doing a live stream and we won't be able to take your questions live, we do want to hear your questions. We do want to take your comments. And on screen now is an email address for you. Edie's email address is eowsley@flchamber.com, and that'll appear several times throughout this morning's live stream. Please send us your questions. Please send us your comments. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. Also, before I turn it over to Dr. Parrish, let me give you a bit of context as Chamber President about where Florida is and where we see Florida going. First of all, remember, we're the third largest state in America. We're almost 22 million residents, and by 2030, we're going to add another 4.5 million people to Florida, just in 10 years. Soon, Dr. Parrish will give you our outlook, our population outlook for 2020. Obviously, people are moving to Florida, and they're bringing incomes and education with them. And I have some brand new numbers to share. Every hour of every day, we have over $1 million of income moving to Florida. That's nights, weekends, holidays included. If you're writing that down, that's $1.19 million of income moving into Florida every hour of every day. Look, as New York, Illinois, New Jersey, California, as they raise taxes and they raise regulations, they're losing populations. And the smart ones are figuring out what Governor DeSantis is doing, what the legislature's doing, what the Florida Chamber's been pushing. We're growing our private sector. We're creating economic opportunity. And people are moving to Florida. Again, Dr. Parrish will give you our projections for job numbers as well. But here's a number. By 2030, job creators in Florida need to create 1.5 million new private sector jobs. Again, Dr. Parrish will share our outlook for 2020 in just a few minutes. So we have over 13.5 million registered voters in Florida, and the whole nation is watching what happens in Florida, not just with our economy, but everyone knows the road to the White House goes through Florida. So generally speaking, voters in Florida think that Florida's heading in the right direction by a margin or a factor of 2 to 1. Twice as many people think we're heading in the right direction as the wrong direction. And they're seeing job opportunities, and they're learning that Florida now has one of the best education systems in America. In fact, for the third year in a row, our colleges and universities in Florida have been ranked #1 in the United States by U.S. News and World Report. Again, all eyes are on Florida, all eyes are on Governor DeSantis, all eyes are on the momentum that collectively we're building in Florida. As I said earlier, 2020 looks to be a year of opportunity for Florida. In fact, if Florida was a country, we would have the 17th largest economy in the world. We're already bigger than Saudi Arabia for perspective. Our strategic plan for Florida, it's known as the Florida 2030 Blueprint, says that Florida in 10 years can become the 10th largest economy in the world. At that point, we would be bigger than Russia, we would be bigger than Mexico, We would be bigger than Spain, South Korea, and that's what Florida can become. That's the opportunity that we had. So as I said, Florida's economy is at a crossroads, and that's why we're focusing on securing Florida's future. Many things are going right, but there are a few clouds, storm clouds on the horizon as well. Like, for example, the $15 mandated minimum wage in Florida. That's not good. The conversation about eliminating our tourism marketing agency, that's not good. The conversation, look what's going on around the world with geopolitical issues. That can impact Florida. And of course, Florida's broken lawsuit abuse problem. The national reports say that Florida has a long way to go to improve here, that we're at the bottom almost. We have the 5th worst legal climate in America. Again, special thanks to Governor DeSantis. He stood with us. There's a growing momentum to fix this. Florida shouldn't be 5th best or 5th worst. We should be in the top 10 when it comes to legal climate. So it's going to take a united business community to make sure the momentum continues. But it's now my privilege and honor. I would now like to introduce to you for our official outlook for 2020, I'd like to introduce to you the Florida Chamber Foundation's chief economist, Dr. Jerry Parrish, who will give you an outlook of where we see Florida going in 2020. Dr. Parrish, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. I'm pleased to provide the 2020 Florida Economic Outlook. Before looking at 2020, I want to take a moment to reflect on 2019. 2019 was an excellent year for Florida. Florida continued to create jobs at a higher rate than the U.S., and that's been going on since 2012. Florida's continued to diversify its economy. Over the past few years, our industry diversification number has gone from being in the bottom half of states to now in the top 20 of all states in the country. One of the reasons for this is that Florida's been growing manufacturing jobs at nearly 3 times faster than the U.S. as a whole. Florida's strong job creation numbers and improved economic diversification were achieved by recruiting companies from other states and other countries, as well as growing companies that were already here in Florida. We know that Florida has become a destination for people from other states and countries who are looking for opportunity, a great quality of life, and as well as companies that are looking for a great place to do business. In early 2019, the U.S. was in a period of high economic uncertainty. We were in the middle of the longest government shutdown ever. We were seeing headlines that the Dow and the S&P 500 were both in corrections during the previous month. They were actually on track for the worst December performance since the Great Depression. The Florida Chamber's Small Index survey showed that economic uncertainty was the #1 issue, and that was the only time that economic uncertainty had appeared in the top spot in the past 2.5 years. And when economic uncertainty is high, we know that business investment declines. So last year, I forecasted 150,000 jobs to be created in 2019 due to those high levels of economic uncertainty. To check how that compares to what happened, there are 2 jobs numbers that we look at in Florida to see how we're doing. They're both calculated a little differently, and one actually comes out a little earlier than the other, but we use both numbers. The preliminary numbers that we have now, which are November 2018 through November 2019 of one of those series, indicate that Florida created 217,400 jobs over the past year. The other number I look at is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's the quarterly census of employment and wages. Those numbers show that Florida created 157,500 jobs year over year, with the most current number they've released, and that's through the second quarter of 2019. Soon, the jobs numbers will be updated through a revision process. In March, we'll see the revised numbers for 2019. I look forward to seeing both of those series when they are finalized to compare them to last year's forecast. Now for 2020. When I calculated my forecast for 2020, I looked at consumer sentiment and many other metrics and did a lot of calculations and alternate forecasts. I expect Florida to continue to create jobs at a higher rate than the U.S. I expect Florida to create 200,000 jobs in 2020. You can get the detailed look at that forecast when you download the slides on the website. Now let's look at the population forecast. When we got the July 2018 through July 2019 population numbers, the increase was lower than in previous years. The number we received was a population increase of 233,420. That's substantially lower than the average of the year since 2010. That estimate indicates that Florida increased by 640 net new people a day compared to the 900 net new people a day I forecasted last year. I believe we'll see a return to the 900 daily number when we get the results from our upcoming 2020 census. My forecast is that Florida will see an increase of 320,000 people in 2020. What's really important is that we have a good, complete census. This week, Governor Ron DeSantis announced the formulation of the 2020 Census Statewide Complete Count Committee and appointed Florida Chamber President Mark Wilson. The committee will coordinate with the U.S. Census Bureau to ensure Floridians are accurately reflected in the federal count. Now let's talk a little bit about the future of Florida's economy. We still have 284,000 open jobs in Florida and 323,000 people looking for jobs. Those 284,000 open jobs is actually more than Florida created last year. As we work to continue to get Floridians the skills they need to close this skills gap, keep in mind that getting those jobs filled would have a monster positive economic impact on our state. Now I want to talk about the probability of recession. The Florida Chamber Foundation has been tracking the probability of recession on the floridascorecard.org. I developed a forecasting model, and we released the first results in January of 2018. Some of the metrics that I use in this forecasting model are these: housing starts, Florida's initial unemployment claims, commercial airport activity, open jobs, the Florida trade-weighted dollar. That's an index put out by the Dallas Federal Reserve, the interest rate yield spread, and also Florida's consumer sentiment. We get those numbers from the Bureau of Economic and Business Research at the University of Florida. Currently, Florida's probability of recession over the next 9 months is 21.2%. This indicator has declined steadily since hitting a yearly high in September 2019 when it was at 38.1%. The drop in the probability of a Florida recession is in large part due to no longer having an inversion in the interest rate yield spread, and also due to an increase in Florida's consumer sentiment. The current consumer sentiment number is 100.1. It has increased most months since a recent low in August of 2019. I encourage you to visit the floridascorecard.org to see many of these economic data points that I've shared today, along with a host of additional key economic statistics. They're both at the state level and for every Florida county. The floridascorecard.org is available, it's free, and it's online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As Mark indicated, Florida is at a crossroads, and there are threats to Florida's economy. In the near term, there's a big issue with international trade and tariffs. This issue continues to cause uncertainty for Florida's businesses. Not knowing what tariff rate that goods will be subject to makes it difficult for Florida businesses to plan, and it causes businesses to hold off investing. This is causing a reduction in our international trade as well. Nobody wins a trade war, and I'm hoping that we can get these issues solved. Oil prices are another issue. Recent increases in oil prices typically cause consumers to have less to spend on other items. This is important for Florida, where 76% of our state's general revenue comes from sales and use taxes. However, now that the U.S. is a major oil producer, it may also cause more investment in U.S. oil production. Now, for the longer term, The big threat I see coming that will affect Florida's economy is the impact that a $15 minimum wage would have on our state. No state has ever passed a public referendum raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And of the states that have increased it to $12 an hour, none made it by receiving 60% of the vote. Increases in minimum wage sound like a good idea to many people. But what happens in a lot of cases is that it ultimately hurts the very people its supporters claim that it will help. Many people get cut from full-time down to part-time hours, and they lose their benefits. There are also definitely jobs lost, and some businesses will definitely close. Second, one of the issues for the long term is signaling around Visit Florida, sending messages to business in other states and other countries. Now, we all know that successful businesses market themselves, and Florida has had much success marketing to visitors from all over the world. To have a consistent brand that uses co-op marketing helps not only the large attractions, but also the smaller attractions and hotels in Florida. And this has resulted in Florida receiving billions of dollars in state and local taxes. This keeps Florida from having to impose a state income tax. What I think tourism marketing does is attract those higher spenders that have many options for places to go. No doubt Florida is competing against other parts of the U.S. and other countries for the higher spenders, especially those international visitors who stay longer and spend more. That's why I see the threat to ending Visit Florida as one that could cost our state substantial amounts of jobs and also tax revenue. And finally, with the recent events in the Middle East, and understanding that Florida has 20 military bases, 3 combatant command centers, and 1.5 million veterans in Florida, a lot of families could be impacted by these events. Of course, it's too soon to tell, but it's something we should keep an eye on. That's my 2020 Florida economic outlook. I'll turn it back over to Mark.
All right, well, Dr. Parrish, we're so glad you're on the team, and we appreciate that outlook. I think the information you shared is key. It'll help small businesses put plans together. It'll also help families with budgeting and planning. So we appreciate you being here today, appreciate the economic outlook. Bottom line, I think if Florida was a stock, it would be a strong buy. Our fundamentals are strong. 200,000 new jobs we're predicting in 2020, 320,000 more residents we're predicting. We're in the top 20 most diversified economies in the United States, and we're the 17th largest economy in the world. So on behalf of the Florida Chamber of Commerce, thank you very much for tuning in. You can download a copy of today's forecast at floridachamber.com/2020 economic outlook. Also, while you're there, you can request an exclusive and free offer, a copy of our official Where We Stand, which is our competitiveness agenda for 2020. Again, that's floridachamber.com/2020 economic outlook. Dr. Parrish, thank you again for presenting our 2020 outlook. And to our members, our board members, thank you for helping us unite together for good. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for helping us secure Florida's future.